Blog Talk Radio.
Hello there, this is Carol Jorgensen-Sheets, and I am Carol the Coach. My intro is stuck. Who would have thought that would have happened?
Your issues. There are no problems.
Well, I'm not going to let it come on. I am actually going to talk to you about lots of things that are going on in the lives of partners and addicts. You know, this is such an important time to really look at the resources that are available to you so that you can actually get the most help that you need. Now, everybody knows that I believe that addicts really need an opportunity to work a recovery program that is so important, so necessary in keeping them sober. And then for partners, it's so important to find the right support to help you heal. Now, you know I'm a believer in IRCA, and that obviously is an opportunity for you to work together as a couple to get over to post-traumatic growth. But not every couple is successful. And it's such a betrayal when sex addiction has occurred and you find out about it. And then it's more of a betrayal, if you will, when marriage didn't make it, maybe by your choice or maybe not by your choice. So if you're a partner, you may ask, what are the supports available to me so that I can make this work, so that I can feel better? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But in the meantime, I want you to know that there are a lot of opportunities for you to really get the help you need. I just, under the resource tab on Help Them Heal, I split the brain science of sex addiction into 4 parts. I felt it was so important because oftentimes when this has happened to a partner, he or she will think, what's wrong with me? Why did my spouse go to that when my spouse had me? And so I've got a video on that. It's an animated video that talks about the fact that nothing's wrong with you. And then we've got the brain science of sex addiction. What I want partners to know more than anything is that this sex addiction probably occurred years before he or she ever met you. Then that third recovery video is on the tools for success. If men literally practice the 10 tools for recovery, they will have a 98% better chance of really being able to manage this addiction long term. And then last but not least, we have what is IRCA? How does the early recovery couples empathy model work? And that video shows the necessity for the addict to consistently work on both the individual recovery and the relational recovery. So it is so important to make this thing work by doing those 2 things simultaneously. So if you go to Sex Help with Carol the Coach, it'll morph into Help Them Heal. And then when you do that, what you'll find is that a lot of different tabs with a lot of different things. You know, you'll find out what is IRCA. You can sign in and get a free couples guide so that you know who you're working with and you know what to expect. Then we've got 2 different directories Well, actually, we've got 3. We've got the IRCM directory. Those are people that are skilled and trained and certified in early recovery couples empathy model. And then we have Help Her Heal, which is a specialist who can help addicts work through developing empathy. And now we have the Help Them Heal specialists, people who have read the book and done the training for the book, Help Them Heal, and they're ready to walk you through that. So don't hesitate to get on my website and see if any of these things apply to you. Most importantly, I think the big one right now is the workshop that we have coming up April 2nd from 3 to 4:30 Eastern for 9 weeks to help you as a couple work through, help them heal, and get over to post-traumatic growth. Now, as I indicated, not everybody's so fortunate. And we've got couples that decide to divorce. And sometimes that happens to the partner, or sometimes that's the partner saying, I have to take care of myself. I can no longer be in this relationship. And when that does happen, it is so important for you to seek a specialist who can really catapult your success. And so one of the things that I'm super excited about is that we have Amy Woolsey, who actually has been instrumental in helping divorcees figure out how they can find their power. And she has something called the 3 pillars. And she's a coach like I am, and we really believe in empowerment. We know that the most important thing that you can do when all this has gone down and you don't think you can take it another second is to realize that you have choices. And when you have choices, then you are empowered to make decisions. And when you make decisions, that really is all about choice. So I can't stress enough how viable her resources are. I know she's had workshops, she's had classes, and so I asked her to come on the show to talk a little bit about what she is doing. So Amy, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness. It is so awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I so believe in this topic. You know, when partners have gone through betrayal, next to the loss of a child, it's the worst thing that could ever happen to them. And then if by choice or by circumstances their marriage doesn't make it, it's an extra 100 layers of trauma on top of them. And so for you to have created a curriculum and a workbook that is all based on empowerment, I just said, I got to have you on. You've got to talk with our listening audience about what you've done, you know, to help partners heal. So when did you shift from believing that it was your fault to realizing that it really wasn't, that truly this was relational behavior that occurred to you?
Yeah. You know, it's just going off of what you were saying before, like when all of those amazing programs you just offered, Carol, the work that you do, I unfortunately didn't have awareness to any of it. And I'm one of those back in the day girls. So this happened before the term betrayal trauma really caught fire, was really even talked about or known. And so I think a lot of my story is kind of like the learn the hard way, which is why I wanted to do what I'm doing now, make it a little bit easier, because that word that you and I both love, empowered, is so deeply important to me as well, because I was so disempowered. And for me, that shift where I did think everything was my fault, his acting out behaviors, but also started to feel like the divorce was my fault, and I chose it. it was one of those, like, I needed to get out. I needed to have a life-saving divorce. But I still felt guilty. I was still being made to feel guilty. But I give my dad massive amount of credit here, because up until this point, I was just always being told messages like, hey, be more Christ-like, be more patient, faithful, have more sex. I think that for him, the focus was all about how to make him happy, not around my own lived experience in the relationship, not about my concerns or even what I wanted in that relationship, because that was told I needed to compromise that to make him more happy. So for those reasons and more, I was self-aware enough to know that what was happening was not what I wanted. I always, I didn't believe that I deserved different, though, Carol. I felt like I want different, but maybe I'm not worthy of different. Maybe I've done something to mess this up and my entire future up. So I just kept trying harder to be better and to make the situation different. But it was my father who was the one that started to really give validation to the abusive behavior and communication, to call out some of the audacities in his demands and expectations, and calling BS really to a lot of the perspective that I was being fed and told I needed to believe. So having my dad's validation when I couldn't validate it myself was probably that shift for me.
Well, you're talking about this occurred way back when, and I remember when I started my podcast in 2007, there was no other podcast on sex addiction, and there was obviously nothing out there for partners. And so it was really kind of a fly by the seat of your pants experience, and you just did the best you could with what you had, what you knew, and maybe the support of family or friends. And so you realized at some point that it wasn't your fault. How did you get there? How did you learn that?
Again, it was the awareness, and that's why in the way that I coach and helping women coach themselves, I have divided up into those three pillars: awareness, acceptance, and agency. And so it started with more awareness of those behaviors, more awareness of my rights, my rights as a human, my rights in a marriage, in that relationship. So becoming more aware of healthy, what is and isn't, is that place to start, where I think a lot of us need to start. Otherwise, it's denial, it's rationalization, minimization, justification, and I lived there for a really long time in those lack of awareness places. So for me, it was the awareness piece.
I am such a numbers girl. So will you give me an idea of when discovery was for you? What year?
Yeah. So, gosh, real discovery, I would probably have to say was 2008, where, no, I take that back. It was actually 2005.
Okay.
But a really, really traumatic event happened in 2008. And more and more information started to come out. But in 2005, that's when I started to see that he was looking at pornography. He was into things that were not an agreement in our relationship that would, take place. So, but it was very easy for me, like I mentioned before, to believe his justifications and minimizations so that I could stay in that protective denial.
Right.
So I stayed there for a while.
Well, and I believe, as we've been taught through AFSATs, that brain functioning is offline. It is such a trauma state to be in. And so it makes sense that it took you a few years to feel everything settle and to begin to have that awareness of, this isn't about me. This is about his atrocity. This is about him not working. And more importantly, and I'm just making this up because I don't know your ex-husband, nor do I know your story, being rigorously honest to build a whole new marriage. Because that's
right.
What has to be at the foundation of a whole new marriage is honesty.
Yeah.
And so,
well, and the tragedy is that there was no honesty in the very beginning before we even got married. And that's a big part of a lot of my client stories as well, is I wasn't made aware of his addiction and his struggles when we were dating, when we were engaged, and certainly not in the marriage. And so you are already, you mentioned something earlier about choice and having choice. I believe that choice wasn't even given to me. It was taken from me in the very beginning because I didn't go into the marriage with full honesty and disclosure of what I was getting into. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about choice, gosh, I think it goes back before the marriage in a lot of, stories, mine as well, but a lot of the clients that I work with is I didn't know what I was getting into to begin with. So I didn't even have a choice.
Mm-hmm. And, I talk to so many addicts that fool themselves. There may be ultimate, absolute deception from day one. Or they may believe that if they just get married and they just find the right person, that their addiction will dissolve or it'll be manageable or they won't need it anymore. And, of course, there's nothing that could be further from the truth. And so they fool themselves. And Patrick Carnes, the godfather of sex addiction, he says, as therapists and coaches, when we're working with addicts, we have to keep them out of denial and that minimization, that justification, that rationalization. I mean, I just happened to talk with a man, a couple of weeks ago, and he said, I would take advantage of my wife when she was asleep. And finally, a therapist called me on it and said, you are raping your wife. And he had minimized that to believe that if she really wasn't awake, it wasn't a problem. He was getting his needs met, and he wasn't even bothering her. And so that's kind of that sickness that can occur when an addict is pursuing the addiction. So now let me ask you, because you said awareness is the first pillar. Mm-hmm. And so was it your father that created that first moment of awareness, or did something else shake you up and kind of shake that awareness feature inside of you that we all have, but obviously intuition feels very compromised when you've been lied to over and over and over again?
Yeah, it is very much compromised. And I think, unfortunately, in my story, I had lost so much of myself over the years. It really wasn't until I left. I had an experience, and I ended up leaving, going to my parents' house. I was in Kentucky. They lived in Arizona. And I had a moment, a few days there. And that's really where this big awareness started to shift for me. It was me honestly stopping. I wasn't hiding my story as much anymore. I had hidden a lot of it. I didn't tell people what was going on in terms of the abusive behavior, or even to the extent of his addiction. So the awareness started with me actually being vulnerable and truthful too to my parents, and then they could help me start to be a little bit more aware of the reality of the situation. But I would have moments of awareness, Carol, throughout my marriage, like, that doesn't feel right, or you know what? Something isn't adding up here. And I would explain it, but then the gaslighting and the manipulation and all of that type of abusive communication was going on. And I was very quick to agree with his perspective and gaslight myself at that point. So that became sort of the pattern. So to answer your question, it really was that moment of leaving the situation for a period of time, which is why separations can be really helpful. Just time away can be really clarifying. Mm-hmm. And that's I could start to be more aware of the severity of my situation.
Well, that makes sense as well. As if we look at things from a brain science perspective, you were calming down your brain enough to be able to begin to see what you might need to do. And so, you've lived that awareness piece. how do you help your clients in the awareness pillar of healing?
Most of the time, clients will come and they will be very much in that prefrontal cortex, trying to figure it all out, right? They want validation, answers, checklists, tools to make it all go away faster, like the pain that is. But I really try to guide them towards their bodies. Becoming more aware of their bodies is where we can get more of the reality of things as they really are, where we can see our truth. And when trust has been blown up in our faces, like you mentioned before, the rug completely ripped out from underneath you, and we can't really even trust our thoughts at this point, especially when they've been manipulated by your partner to believe that false reality. So trusting the body first and being aware of what is the body saying, that's where I start to help them return to.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so that next pillar is acceptance, right?
Yeah.
And what did acceptance look like in your life, and how do you see it in your clients' lives?
This is a really hard one. This is where a lot of us get stuck. I think this is where it's easy to get stuck. And first of all, acceptance is not the same as approval. I actually took the principle of acceptance into two different stages. I believe that there's this very foundational acceptance, and then you could move into more of a transformational, like, okay, I'm accepting things as they really are, and now what I want to do with them. But this foundational acceptance is really we're slowly shifting out of denial, out of that rationalization, minimization, justification. We're accepting what we can't control, which is hard. That's where I think we get stuck the most. Letting go of I can't control what he does, how he heals, if he does, what he chooses. That's a lot right there, right? To help clients maneuver through this letting go of things that they thought they were in control of. False sense of control. And again, accepting what the body sensations are telling them. What is your body telling you right now? And let's believe your body. So it's this very basic, like where it all started is what accepting, it's accepting help. Like I mentioned before, I needed to accept that I needed help, accepting that I needed my parents' help. And I couldn't give that to myself right at that time. So basic foundational acceptance can look like calling a professional who gets it so that they can help you see things as they really are.
So were there professionals back in 2005, 2008 that knew how to do partner betrayal? Because I know APSATs didn't get started till 2012.
I know. No, unfortunately, I did not know any of that. And fortunately, God put a therapist in my path around 2015, 14, 15. And I guarantee she was not like trained in betrayal trauma or anything, but she definitely was extremely helpful in accepting. I remember this one time we went in, and at this point I was open to trying to make it work, even though I had left. And I kind of had some stipulations. This is what needs to happen in order to reintegrate. And one of those was marriage counseling. So we were both in there, and he ended up walking out, which was a very typical pattern, walking out of the session in the middle of it. And she looked at me, square in the eyes, and she said, "He's not capable. He lives in this world over here, and we all live in this world." And it was this very clear moment I'll never forget. And at that moment, it was this acceptance, a foundational acceptance. Like, Amy, you cannot control him. He is not capable because he's not choosing into any of the healing. So I remember that very, very clearly. And she was pivotal for me in that moment. So I got lucky.
why I always say a therapist or a coach is like a mirror, and they're looking at you and you're looking back, and they are mirroring what they see. And in this situation, even if she didn't have partner betrayal expertise, she did know that he wasn't capable of giving you what you needed. And, you know, as you describe him, he was clearly not capable of being honest with himself either.
Correct. Which is really the root of it, right? Yeah.
Right. So, is this the phase that you really believe that women get stuck in the most?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they get stuck here. I think the approval versus acceptance can get a little tricky. That cultural messaging, even gaslighting even growing up, right? But acceptance, it's about seeing things as they really are, not as I wanted them to be or hoped they could be. And I see that with my clients a lot, these dreams that we had. And again, because of that reality collapse, right, they kept you in this false reality through that abusive behavior and communication. And so when you have that reality collapse, it's really hard to see that new reality. And that's where I think some clients can get sucked into the, well, this isn't fun. This is painful. I don't like this. This isn't what I wanted. And so we tend to put ourselves back up in that false reality that we had lived in for so long. And then also the disconnection from ourselves that false reality created. So very much disconnected to their bodies, to their higher self. Mm-hmm. And that, too, can keep them stuck in that acceptance pillar.
You know, I really am a believer that words shape attitudes. As a matter of fact, I've written columns on it. I've done podcasts on it. And one of the very simple shifts in working with partners is when they say, I can't, I say, would you at least change that to I choose not to? Yeah. Because that enables power, whereas I can't is more of that victim place. And the truth is, if they don't want to get a divorce, they can choose not to get a divorce. You know, one of the beautiful things about APSATs is that they say, hey, you know what? Until you know what you want to do, you don't have to do anything. Or you can stay for the kids or the money, or because you're too tired to move furniture, or because you don't want to relocate, or because you don't want to live with your parents.
Or get a job.
Or get a job. Or you can choose to leave and ask people for help along the way, because nobody is really stuck unless they're in such a physically abusive relationship. They fear for their own lives and their children's lives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I love that. And I do that with my clients as well. Just that shift of I can't, even I have to, even I need. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's so important. And I think that's that foundational piece is, okay, what do we need here? But at some point, let's shift I choose. And going back to what you and I both talking about mentioning earlier is this, even the marriage. Like, I don't know about your story, Carol, but for me, that divorce, because of the religious background that I had, it was like divorce was not an option. Divorce was not encouraged. It was very much do everything you can to the detriment of yourself to stay in that marriage. And so even divorce wasn't a choice, which therefore marriage wasn't a choice. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So even choosing, like, I need to choose to be in this marriage and choose to stay. And when you can use that framework, it's amazing to watch my clients go, like when they sit with that framework, mm-hmm. wait, I choose to stay. Mm-hmm. You know, I'll like say, here's what you're choosing to do. Let's repeat that back. And they hear themselves say, I am choosing to stay. I am choosing to ignore my body. I'm choosing to, put up with this type of abusive behavior and communication. That's when things start to click, because it loosens up and gets out of that denial, because you are stepping into your beautiful empowerment, your agency, which is that third pillar.
Well, that's
And
right. And, you know, for our listening audience, I am talking with Amy Woolsey, and she can be contacted by going to Amy at lifecoachingwithamy.com. And your website is amywoolsey.com,
yes.
correct?
amywoolsey.com.
Yeah, and Amy provides a variety of resources and services. You created this workbook, and it's a very simplistic but important workbook to help partners begin to see what they're capable of. And it's based on your 3 pillars, is it not?
I have several workbooks, but one that recently that I put out on the ATLAS conference was one about boundaries, mastering those boundaries through and post-divorce. I have a Divorce 101 workbook that walks through the different pillars very slowly. I think that when women are in that should I stay or should I go, they don't know what divorce looks like. So this is a very slow down, basic, okay, what is that next right step for you right now? And I walk them through the different 3 pillars. So,
well, and she is a betrayal trauma practitioner, and she does brain spotting, so you recognize trauma and you know how to treat it, and it's one of the most effective trauma treatments. And you're a coach, and you're specialized in this, correct?
Correct. It's what I do. It's what I love.
Yeah, and she is the creator and host of the Empowered Divorce podcast. She's co-host to the Choose to Be podcast with Safe Space, and the creator of her signature program, Believing in You, Divorce 101, and Intimacy Within. And so, literally, how can our listeners check out your services, your programs, and your empowerment?
Just head over to my website, amywoolsey.com, and I will walk you through and meet. My goal is to meet you where you're at, because this is so nuanced, and everybody is in such a different spot. And so my goal is to meet you where you're at and not push you anywhere further than you want to go, but take it really that one, what is that right next step for you right now? And my job is to help you get there.
Right. And so you mentioned a word that's really being talked about a lot, and that's that 3rd pillar, agency.
Yep.
Would you explain to our listening audience what is agency, and how can that be crucial to feeling that sense of empowerment that we all want to get to, regardless of what has happened to us?
This one hits my heart every time I talk about it, because if you have been in a situation where you have had power, where you have been acted upon, right, power taken from you, to be able to get your power back, to be able to choose, be the chooser, is an act of agency. And every human being has the right to be their own agent unto themselves. And being able to access that is what sets you in motion to be the creator of your life. And that's one of the things I'll say on my podcast, is that you can create the life that you want through this beautiful gift of agency, because you can. And when you start to believe that you can, it unlocks those limitations that we put on ourselves, that our brain offers us, that trauma parts offer us. So agency is choice. It's the power of choice. And for me, as I came out of my healing journey and out of that marriage that took power and choice away, I committed to myself to be an agent unto myself and never self-betray again. And then I will always be the chooser. And that's what I want to help my clients do.
Yeah, because when they recognize that they have choices and they work from that place, I'm sure you believe in this too, we attract into our lives what we believe in ourselves. And so nobody attracted partner betrayal into their life. As a matter of fact, it's the greatest deception ever. But now that you know what you know, I ask them to practice my number one coaching tool, and that is I'm 100% accountable for my behavior. And no matter if I get T-boned, if my husband were to leave me, whatever, I get to choose how I react to that and what I do. That is empowering, you know?
Yeah. I call it your control bubble. That's how I phrase it. Like, let's just practice staying in your control bubble, and you can control your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. And that goes along with that foundational acceptance, right? I can't control what's over in other people's bubbles, but let me choose into agency and control what's in mine, and that is my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions.
Yeah, I like that, the control bubble, and certainly it has remnants for sure. The Serenity Prayer.
Yeah, yep.
And,
Absolutely.
you know, for a lot of people, when they're in trauma and that executive functioning has kind of gone offline, it is difficult initially to say, okay, let me accept what I can change and what I can't and have the wisdom to know the difference. And they don't feel their own wisdom. But as they begin to ask for more support and to believe in themselves, all that wisdom comes back, that intuition, and that's when they can really work on what they choose and how they shift their energy, right?
Absolutely.
So what happened in your life? Obviously, I'm always talking about post-traumatic growth. I have this course on 8 partners that made specific choices to better their life. And you really have done that too. So at what point did you decide you were going to get back to partners?
It was actually fairly early on, not long after the divorce was final, because I was having such a hard time feeling understood, heard, finding the answers to really what was going on. I, as a Christian woman, I sort of made a pact with God, and I said, all right, if you can help me get through this, I want you to then use me so that I can reach out and help others get through this, because I felt so alone, so isolated, so misunderstood, not seen, in this deep of a way. Mm-hmm. Unless you've been through it, you just don't get it. So it was actually very divinely orchestrated, I believe. I think that I just put my faith in God and said, okay, I need your help. Don't have a whole lot of it. Just figure this out. And if you can get me through, then I will turn around, I will give back, and I will help others. And I did that pretty quickly. Reached out to some church organizations and just put my name out there. So if you know of a woman who's struggling, here's my number. And I started talking with women. So that's kind of where it started.
And then what year did you go to APSATS and get certified?
So I am a candidate, and I am 5 hours away from certification. I was so excited. 5 hours away from that, but I went, well, I guess it's been a year. About a year ago, I started that through the encouragement of Alana Gordon, who is on the board of APSAT. And so I get to work with her and a lot of Sarah Morales and Ray Galen, a lot of other people who are associated with it. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized this is huge. This is a huge piece that I want to add to my scope to help other people, to help women, clients, couples.
And it really is an investment. We're not allowed to talk money, but APSATS in and of itself is so reasonably priced for the cost of 5 or 6 sessions max. You can be trained in APSATS, but to be certified requires that you do 30 hours with a group of people that are certified supervisors, and that can be a bit costly. And yet, the mentoring, the guidance.
Oh, worth it. Oh my gosh, it is so worth it, Carol. As you know.
And that's why you said you're 5 hours away. You've completed probably 25 hours. You got 5 more hours, and then you will be certified. And I always say recovery for addicts, the 12th step is about giving back. Now, there's a part of me that hates to tag partners with recovery. I know they're recovering, but it makes them sound like they did something wrong. And we know partners did nothing wrong. You may not have had a good marriage. Yeah, you may not have had a good marriage, and you may have had your own marital strife, but that had nothing to do with the addiction.
Nope.
So it sounds like
it's that post-traumatic growth, right? We've experienced something that we didn't choose. There's that agency being taken, act upon, and yet the moment you realize something's been taken from you, you step into that agency, and then it's, what do I want to choose to do with this? What meaning do I want to give it? What story do I want to tell about it? And that's that post-traumatic growth and resilience that giving back, so to speak, is for me. So.
Well, and I know that I don't know because I'm not a partner, but I know that that it doesn't mean that you don't do the jig. And you're in post-traumatic growth, and then something happens, and back in safety and stabilization, and you're bouncing back and forth, and then maybe you're in grief and anger, but then you're back in post-traumatic growth. The truth is, if you can get over to post-traumatic growth, you'll be able to handle phase 1 and phase 2 when something triggers you or somebody has a setback that triggers you. No doubt